I look forward to chatting about this.
Okay. Yeah, so brand tracking is a funny one. What do you say that?
Uh, the reason for it is well, one is why are you tracking your brand? I think is the big one. Um,
Well, it's the
I
same
would
with
go and take
MMN.
the.
It's like why are you tracking all your MMN? It's like it's generally the answer is because they want to justify spend, or somehow it has something to do with like budget. It's not about effectiveness per se.
I think a lot of it is to demonstrate that something actually went and happened,
Yeah,
and then you're trying to go and show whether it had value.
which is kind of
So the
confirmation bias, right? Or off the bat.
it very much can be that way, and a lot of it has to do with the measures that you're going to use for brand tracking. Like one thing that you got to remember is brand tracking is trailing.
Mm,
So in terms of its traditional definition, so you're kind of looking at what the market did, and then did it fulfill on the objective that you went and had,
yeah.
and then what it comes back to is what are your objectives and how significant does the change need to be to show that you're fulfilling on them,
Mm.
and that work is frequently not being done.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? It's kind of like I was listening to an episode I did with Ross from Asahi, right? And he
Mm-hmm.
was saying how he worked for this bank. And again, we're not going to name names here, but it was a large brand tracking firm. They were reporting to him that their bank was slightly above all the other sort of leading banks in some sort of like range of metrics that they had come up with.
Mm-hmm.
And then he went to an agency who had the competing bank, so we're direct competitors, and the graph was reversed for the same time periods. And it was like, what's going on here? So, those kind of things happen. And I don't think a lot of people notice that. They just sort of go on the fact that some of these brands are well-known brand tracking firms, and, why shouldn't we trust them? And then he was like, okay, well, I just kind of proved that something fishy is going on here. So have you come across that as well in your
Yes,
line? Yeah. Okay.
I have seen it a lot. I've especially seen it where there's syndicated brand tracking that is sold by firms, and then you go, so they start tracking your brand for you,
Hmm.
and then I've gotten had interesting stories, some good, most not. Um, uh, let's be honest. If everybody got bad news, this stuff wouldn't be sold.
Well, that's the thing.
Um,
Yeah, yeah. Who
yeah,
wants to see that the brand is like shit or like
yeah.
really far below where their expectations were? Like, who's going to pay for that? They're going to be like, "Hey, you're fired. Get me another one."
So the big one is when you get out of like a syndicated brand tracking and you get into your own individual one, you have two problems. One, you're going to go and discover that the syndicated data cannot be replicated for you individually when you increase the sample size, which seems very confusing.
Mhm.
But that's
So,
probably
so,
a
so,
whole conversation on its own.
sorry, just go back one step. What do you just to explain what syndicated brand tracking is?
Yeah, so syndicated brand tracking is where a research firm or a consultancy or an agency, they go and start tracking a bunch of brands at the same time. They'll run like a mass study. If it's on the consumer side, thousands of people. If it's on the B2B side, probably half a thousand or more. And they'll throw in like 15, 20 brands, and they're just going to go and ask people what their opinions are. But the opinions are against the same set of measures, and the context is what's your opinion on this measure. When you switch from syndicate and you switch to actually business, when we're like, hey, how's my brand doing versus these direct competitors or substitutes, you've now shifted the context of why the person is responding. So if I go and ask you, let's use brand names that we recognize. Hey, you're looking for some shoes, right? The way that John James is going to be responding to a shoe question is very different to the way that John James is going to respond to a Nike question. Like if I go and ask you, hey, what do you think of Nike? Do you like it? You're like, yeah, I generally like it. Like their stuff's pretty good. And then I go to like, hey, I'm going to do a Nike brand tracking study versus Adidas and Puma and Reebok and all the other newer brands that are out there. And all of a sudden you'll be like, wait, like, do I want a shoe? Do I buy Nike shoes first? Like your brain starts operating differently. So your response is going to be different. So this is what I've never seen a syndicate brand study recreated in an actual business purpose application. So it's usually a sales tool to have you realize, maybe I should know this information. And then you got to be conscious of the fact that you're not going to be tracking the same things after. And in my professional capacity, I've lost engagements because I had to tell them, no, we're not continuing the syndicate study. You can't afford us to go and run the syndicate study exclusively for you. So that's kind of like my feedback on that one.
Okay, because we do see a lot of these white papers, which are generally off the back of some of these syndicated results, these studies, right? It's like, hey, the top, 50 brands by value, the top, 50 brands in this category, and yeah, again, I think it just comes back to, if you're going to commission research, are you prepared to hear something you don't like? It reminds me of that Silicon Valley. Have you seen the HBO show Silicon Valley with
I have, yeah.
Gavin Belson? And there's this scene where he's in this like boardroom, and they've done some market research testing on his signature and his calligraphy style on the box of the product. And she reads off some stuff that says he's like a narcissist and sociopathic tendencies, and he just tells this woman to, like, you're fired, get out of my office. I think it sort of sums up a lot of market research if it was done objectively.
I think that's the whole challenge with objective market research is that the person that is commissioning it needs to be looking at it objectively as well. And I think it just goes back to, what's the objective and what are the incentives? And that's going to help you wrap your head around. Like the whole research industry has a big dilemma today, which is there's a race to the bottom in terms of cost, but people are hiring you because they want to improve their own performance quality. It's a disconnect.
Okay, so let's talk about brand tracking, because this did come up, and I think everyone's sort of the sort of vibe that I'm getting is like, okay, you should do ethnographic tracking, you should do macroeconomic tracking, you should do brand tracking, you should do MMM, and even other attribution methods, digital attribution methods, and sort of mix it all together. And it's sort of like your signals or your dashboard on a ship when you're trying to go from one place to the other. And like the more information and signals you have to then make decisions, then everyone's sort of better for it to an extent. But like none of them are like always perfect and gonna tell you and prevent problems and decision making down the track. So when it comes to brand tracking, just tell me, like, what's maybe one of the lower quality brand tracking hallmarks versus something that's really robust and perhaps more of the ilk that you're exposed to?
So I'm going to say something that is, I don't know, may upset some people, and I'll just leave it at that. I have stopped using traditional brand tracking. I actually dislike it, and there's way better bangs for the buck. So my answer is going to come from the better bang for the buck, because when you're going and tracking your brand at the highest level, what are you really looking to do? You're just trying to make a better business decision. And the theory is you're trying to make a better business decision with your customer in mind. And that's still a theory, because not everybody's necessarily doing that. Many people are going and making a business decision with their own self-interest in mind, not necessarily with why they're there as a business in the first place. So on that note, let me go and answer. Like, if you want to go and do an effective way on a cheap budget, I would go and start with yourself first. And I would go and systemically document down why you think people buy your products and services. Just write them down. Right? And when you get to, and then put them into a top 10 and a top 3. Then what you want to go and do is you then want to go and start asking your customers, why do they consider buying from you? And that might be a revelation in its own right. You might not be asking your customers why they're buying from you. Okay? And just ask them. Ask the first things that come into their mind and compare them to where they are on your total list, your top 10 list, and your top 3 list. After about a dozen customers, you're going to start getting a sense of how close or apart you are from your customers in general. After about 30 customer responses, you're going to get to more. Now, here's the really challenging one. Try and get the people who didn't buy from you to answer you. Okay? And go and find out why they didn't buy from you, or why they bought from a competitor or an alternative instead. Okay? That's an organization of one. If you're in a slightly larger organization and you want to know, get everybody in your company to independently do their top lists, put it into their top 10, put it into their top 3. And before you even start asking your customers, see how aligned you are within your own organization as well. And by the way, it's not that everybody has to be aligned. You just need to understand how far apart you are. Okay. You spent no money. You used a free Google Forms or the 10-question Survey Monkey or something like that to be able to get to this. But it's the act of measuring that gives you the value.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you want to get into the tracking side of it, track every month internally, track every quarter internally, and just see what you're going and getting. And you'll notice that people's opinions change as they start engaging with customers, your salespeople, if they're selling direct, your marketing people as they're going and seeing stuff happening in the marketplace, whatever it may be. That's your cheap and easy, probably the best bang for the buck, because you're already paying those people, yourself included, and you're
You
just
don't have to set
going
it up
and
once, and then you just keep
you,
running
you
it, and it'll be
you
slightly
set it up
modified.
once, you keep running it. There's these very expensive tools out there to track it, like Google Forms,
Very
Microsoft
expensive.
Excel,
Crazy.
Typeform, Apple Sheets. Like, these are expensive ways of doing it. And the reason why they're expensive is because you have to have the discipline to do it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right? We sometimes pay for brand tracking to other people so that they can do our job for us. Okay.
Okay. Yep. So
That's your
okay.
good.
So then you've got this internal hypothesis,
Yeah.
right, which you then have to validate with customers and your target market, or some
Yeah.
of which are customers and some of which are not customers, to test that hypothesis. Yeah.
So that's your free one. That's your cheap, easy, very effective, best bang for the buck. I would say if you want to go and upgrade it, you then go and spend some money and pick probably the most business critical aspect of what your company does. It's like if you're single product, single service, then it's pretty straightforward. But like if you have multiple products, multiple services, different countries, different competitive sets, pick the one that is objectively the most important to you. Either you think it's your most profitable or your highest potential, and just invest into understanding that. But the first step in doing that is do what you did with the quick and easy. Ask yourself, why are people going and buying? What's the alternatives? Who's the competition? And then go in there. Notice that I haven't made any mention of, what's the awareness or anything of that. The reason for it is that you are aware of your competitors or you're not. If you go and do some online research and you go and put in who's competitors of John James, and you will go and see a bunch of names pop up, some of who you've never gone and heard of because other people think it's the competitor. So the medium one is just go and do it on the one that's most important. But what you're looking for is what are the most valuable positions that have people buy goods and services. And then you got to figure out and have those objective questions for yourself, which is, can I deliver against those? Or can I invest sufficiently into marketing and brand building that people associate that we can deliver against those consistently in the marketplace? So that's kind of like the medium version. The more expensive version is you then go and do it on a continuous cycle with the future in mind. You're now starting to understand from your customer base what matters to them in the future. What are they trying to grow towards? When are they anticipating buying your goods and services? What would have them go and switch? And now you're starting to get into, okay, what should I be conscious of? And the reason why you want to track things like that is you want to go and track your extremities becoming the norm. So either the big innovators start to go and start having the trickle down effect that everybody else is trying to be like them, or you go and see the brands or the companies that are really bugging things up, and they are kind of starting to self-destruct, and there's an opportunity to come in and serve their previous customer bases. So that would be kind of like my, good, better, best, or, free, cheap, expensive solution.
No, that's great. Okay, and just something that hit me sort of interesting, because there's a lot of talk about certain brand metrics, awareness and aided, non-aided. That's another whole discussion right there. Is this what is brand awareness? And then there's
it's a good one if you know how to use it.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. But is it just indicative? Like a lot of this stuff is done for then looking at some sort of bottom line effect, right? And a lot of these metrics are somewhat correlated, as you know.
No.
Like the
you're
bigger
getting into the causation because of correlation.
yeah, but I mean, the bigger you are, the more sales you get. Obviously, the more people that know about you. So it's kind of like, well, what are we measuring here? Like, by virtue, they're obviously connected, but did one precede the other? I think is the assumption a lot of the time. Like, the more advertised, the more people are aware of me, the more people that will buy me is the fallacy. And obviously
that's not true. In a lot of the B2B work that I've gone and done, high awareness of a B2B brand creates a stalking horse phenomenon, which really pisses off the high aware companies, because then they're always in the short list, they're always asked to submit a bid, and then they're wondering why their close rate is not so great. That's assuming that their brand has some of that, negative tarnish to it. But in terms of like awareness, let's just take a look at that awareness question, because that's a big one that I go and see.
Yep.
Brand awareness only matters with the types of people who actually want to buy your product or service, and you want them to buy your product and service. Everybody else's awareness is actually meaningless. Now, there is another type of brand awareness, which is very critical, which is employment awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Are you a company that people want to work for, or you're planning on growing and you want to build that awareness as an employer brand? And I think we've kind of created this conflation of Gen Pop awareness, customer awareness, and employer awareness, and thrown it into this one massive thing called brand awareness. And I just think you got to figure out, pick your awareness and solve for that. Just like when we go and have people go and say, oh, I have 20% market share. And I'm like, really? Which market share? Revenue share? Unit share? Transaction share? Profit share? Right? Like, I'd like to be like Apple and have 90% of the profit share in the mobile handset market.
Yeah,
I don't care. Like, they have the minority of the units sold. They have a minority of the revenue, but they're making all the money. So, it goes the same thing with like, what's the awareness that you're looking for? I've rarely seen a company benefit from having greater than 40% overall market awareness in a linear fashion. You start getting diminishing returns.
Okay.
And the
then
reason for it is you found your customers.
I've seen the same thing, but then then they go, oh well, it's not about awareness, it's about consideration, and then it's like it's about
No.
intent, and then it's like stated behavioral intent. We know the problems with that. So, and then it's like, and you have these other arguments. I've seen people that come with other terms like salience or mental availability. It's about coming to mind during a purchase decision. Some people conflate that with consideration.
So you just pointed to something right there, John, which is, who are you trying to get these metrics from? If you're trying to get these metrics from the overall population, then you have a real problem. Your customers is not the majority of the population in any single category. And yes, I will go out and people argue to me like the penetration of brands like Coca-Cola and Nike and things like that. No, like, look, if one person went and got one Coca-Cola six-pack in a year, that doesn't make them a valuable customer for Coca-Cola. It was a fringe benefit. Okay, so what you got to take a look at is what's actually valuable for you. So I personally do not report on awareness, brand consideration, and purchase intent at the mass level with any of our clients. And it's not what I teach at the graduate level. You have to find out what it is with the types of customers that you actually value buying from you, because they will be profitable customers. If you're not doing it with that, then it's a wasted, expensive effort.
Okay. So you're saying then find out your sort of subcategory of users within the larger category and test for that, but also be aware that if you want to grow, you will have to go outside that oil well or that sort of subcategory into in a bigger area. So also track perhaps.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. But your growth, you're not going to be growing using the same value proposition. I think people think that they come up with a value proposition and then all of a sudden everybody should be going and buying it. No, people buy your brand because the reason that they buy your brand. It happens to be consistent with, one other, 100 other, 1 million other, 10 million other people. But don't think that everybody's going and buying it because of the reason that you went and asked them to. So as long as you're kind of conscious of that and have that objectivity, and then your growth is going to be because you serve your existing customer base with another solution or product or service that they like, or that they trust to be coming from you because they really have loved your brand to date. Like, why does a person go and buy another pair of shoes from the shoe manufacturer they like? Because they like them. Right? Like, it's like your shoe was great. It did what it did. It allowed me to walk from point A to point B, and the sole didn't come
It
off.
looks pretty good, you know,
It
makes me
looks
feel
good.
you know?
Exactly,
Yeah.
right? I was able to wear it for 2 years without having to
That's
buy another pair.
I think that's too simple to justify high prices of a brand tracking study. So and on that point, if I was in the market for
Yeah.
someone and choosing between brand trackers or brand firms to measure, you know, whatever kind of brand thing that I want to measure,
Yeah.
if you could give me a bit of okay, these are some red flags or hallmarks of maybe the market you should probably avoid, and then these are the hallmarks of maybe some of the better firms. So you know, okay, then ask a list of questions to some of these
Yeah.
vendors, and then quickly ascertain whether they're, you know, worth considering or not for purchase. What would they be?
Okay, I'm going to go slightly off the beaten path.
Okay.
And I'm assuming I have budget here, right, John? This is not I have no
Yeah,
money
yeah,
and
yeah.
I'm
I'm
going
an
to go.
enterprise grade. I've got tens of thousands, hundred
Yeah.
thousand a year probably to you know run
Okay.
this kind of thing. Yeah.
The first thing that I would go and do is I would go and take I would find I'd do a long bid, say what I'm looking for, and ask these different firms to submit.
Mhm.
And then I would go and ask them, if I gave you $10,000 or $15,000 as a pay to scope, what can you deliver against that money?
Okay.
And then if I gave you 10 times as much, what would you go and deliver instead? And then go and compare those submissions. And then take your top three, give them $10,000 each, and then see if they went and delivered against them, and then hire the best one and give them the remaining $120,000 if you have a $150,000 budget.
Okay, kind of like a Lord of the Flies, kind of like tryouts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. But it's like, don't spend all your money in one fund. Like pay to scope, or pay them to scope out properly and get them to understand what it is. Like, they're going to be going there and giving their proposal to you based on the same data that you're using, which is desk research, online reviews, etc.
Yeah.
But if they have a bit of budget, and you'll be able to kind of go and see, what's the quality of the response. I've gone and had that happen with clients that I've advised or worked with, where we've gone and done out there. The best return on investment ever is that 30 to 45,000 bucks.
Well, okay. Hey, so but also then, I just know that okay, if I was a brand tracking company or vendor, one of the ways I could really reduce my costs is obviously the largest cost of these things is the polling of customers and asking them and all that mechanism, right? Which can, if you do it well, can be quite laborious and lengthy. So one of the ways you make that cheaper is by maybe tapping into some of these sort of third-party sort of panel providers where they have a whole range of people who then you send a survey
man,
to or something,
you're
and
starting to get my yellow flags up.
Okay. So
not red flags yet, but the yellow ones for sure.
Okay, so these do exist, and this is what a lot of the large research firms use, and then they can say, hey, we polled 3,000 or put some volumetric there, or 10,000 sample of people, and these are the results. Aren't we good? Each one of those costs $50, so give us a lot of money. And yes, some of those way the panels have been incentivized or become members of these panel groups can cause a bit of an issue. And then, are they representative? I mean, who knows? You got to go into the details a lot of time, because your sample kind of does matter. What do you say about all that stuff?
Okay, you have opened a Pandora's box of one of the biggest issues in the industry. There's a whole set of series around this that you can do, and I really hope you do them.
Okay.
So I'll give you a start. The cheapest is typically the worst, because the reason for it is that you are trying to reach your customer base through your panel provider. You're trying to reach the people that are going to give you good, profitable money to run your business. So, if you're not giving them value to with the products and services that you sell, why are you hiring somebody who's not going to give value to the time that they spend in responding to your survey? So that's kind of like one thing that's there. The cheapest is definitely a danger in terms of what it is. The second thing that I would kind of take a look at to make sure that you trust this thing, whichever panel provider you go with, is, okay, what's going to be my rejection rate? So how many people that start this survey will credibly be able to complete my survey that I go and put them out there? And you're going to kind of you should get some pretty good yardsticks. Like, it should definitely be much less than 50%.
Okay.
should be completing the survey, because you are a unique snowflake. You are competing with other
Oh, you mean this
snowflakes
is
in the
the
marketplace.
disqualification questions at the start where like, hey, are you
Yeah,
this, are you this? And it's sort of
yeah.
like trying to typify them in terms of are they
That's
in
a
target
really
market or
big
not?
one. Like
Yeah.
why people are even qualified is that's my second one. And the third one is, can I go and participate in the survey myself
Mm.
and see, like, hey, like they're like, oh, we did this, syndicate study, or this sounds great. Let me go and run it and then see if I can get to the end answering bullshit questions. And that's going to go and tell you how well they go and manage their panel or their market research methodologies that is there.
So you basically
Like,
mystery shop them, at the same time.
absolutely. Like
irony.
I think that's one of the really big ones that's there, and that's only going to be there. And it goes back to, and it's your own objectivity. What are you trying to achieve? If you're just trying to go and do a check mark that I went and ran a brand tracking study and it went and demonstrated whatever, you're probably not even going to be the customer for this conversation we're having right now, to be honest.
Exactly. Hey, you did mention privately, we haven't discussed this before, but some funny things that you found out over the years with brand tracking. Perhaps
Yeah.
the expectations of delivering quality brand tracking system for a client then was rejected, or ended up not being used for whatever sort of reasons. And I am touching on sort of the political nature of measurement as well, which I
Yes,
mentioned at
for
the
sure.
beginning. Are there any sort of stories you can talk about, or some strange instances that sort of exemplify that fact?
I'll give you a good one and a bad one.
Okay.
Which one do you want me to start with?
Both. The good one. Let's go to good first.
Okay, let's go with a good one. One of the best, and one of the best brand tracking engagements I've ever been part of. And this is one that was like a multi-billion-dollar benefit.
Okay.
So this is with a global financial services organization. And we're going back years now, right? We're going back years. But as you know, the whole financial services space got completely killed by 2008. So everybody kind of had to really evaluate, like, what are we as a business? And the what was really effective for them is that they went and did a holistic brand tracking exercise. And what that meant is that they measured every single stakeholder that had a mass to it in their customer value chain. So it was end consumers, it was businesses that went and sold their financial services products, it was their employees, it was their independent consultants and sales agents, because they're a global company, so business models varied around the world. And what they did is they went and tested it across the same key metrics that were validated to be driving their ultimate end consumer choice. And what they went and learned was that their employees did not value the same thing as their end consumers. A lot of their channel partners didn't recognize the client as being able to deliver against this. So they came up with their own brand story, why they sold the company's products and services. And this was tracked for a year and a half. And the reason it was tracked for a year and a half is this company could not afford to be wrong. And at 6 data points on a global study, it came back as, okay, yeah, we're not getting more than a 1 or 2% variance quarter to quarter on these results. This must be the case. And they went and subsequently invested hundreds of millions of dollars over the next 2.5 years. And they came out of it 4 years after they started this work with their first billion-dollar quarter profit in the history of the company.
Wow. Okay.
And it's not 100% causation that they went and did this work. You can imagine there's a lot of change management, but they were willing to listen to not just their end consumers, but the whole ecosystem. They sold through a lot of other businesses their various financial services products, and they had to serve the ecosystem. So that's where brand tracking was effective, but it was objective, it was systemic, it was analyzed, it was matched to internal data, it was matched to financial spend. So this was not a lighthearted exercise.
Okay. And what about the bad one? This one
I have so many more, so I'm going to pick one. So I'll give you an example of a bad brand tracking exercise that I went and saw, and this was for, I'll call it a reputable global company that you'd probably recognize the name very quickly.
Okay.
And one of the things that was really confusing for me is they had like a 10 measure brand health study. And this thing wasn't cheap because when you're one of the 250 largest companies in the world, you have a lot of people to go and reach. So they tracked these 12 measures. And the thing that confused the heck out of me, because when I started working with them, they'd been doing this for over 3.5 years, was their brand awareness. This is a company with like, unaided brand awareness of like in the 70% range.
Mhm.
And unaided brand awareness had grown from 71 to 75% over 3.5 years.
Okay.
And they had spent gobbles of money. Like I'm talking tens of millions of dollars a quarter in advertising to go from 71 to 74%. And in that time, so that's like, just think about it. This is slightly more than a 5% increase in unaided awareness. In that 3.5 years, this company's revenue almost doubled. And they
Okay.
were still obsessing about this unaided brand awareness thing. And their aided brand awareness was like 98, 99, 98, 99. It dropped to 96% one time, and it created this massive issue inside the organization. I'm like, that's still within standard error. Like, why are you going? But they didn't know what they should be expecting. Like even the 71 to 70 4% growth or 75% growth in unaided awareness is still very close to your score within standard error. So why was this a bad study? Because the business was outperforming the brand health metrics. So why were you using the brand health metrics to make a decision? Why are you spending nearly $4 million a year on brand health monitoring, right? When it's actually not helping you make a better decision. Your business is outpacing it. So that's kind of my yardstick as well. I off of that, I put one final learning. When you go and create a brand tracking or brand health or brand equity, whatever, identify the conditions for when you will stop using it, when you design it in the first place. Either it's going to meet its objectives and you need to stop using it and design a new one for the next set of objectives, or it's not meeting objectives and is creating problems and you should just kill the budget. And I think a lot of people don't do that. They start these things without the end in mind. And that's what happened in this organization. They
And
just
why is
kept
that?
spending the money.
Why is that? Just so they have some continuity and they probably solved this fallacy that you need to track the same thing and be consistent over time to then accurately track
Yeah,
changes. Yeah.
but your customers change. Like I'll give you a second bad one. I had a prospective client. We were literally at the statement of work stage, and I think I accidentally fired myself because I told them they didn't need to go and keep spending their money on this industry syndicate study that they've been buying for over a dozen years. And they're like, well, how are you going to reconcile against our baseline? And I'm like, your baseline's from 12 years ago. And they're like, yeah, like we go and do all of our benchmarking against it. I'm like, you don't have the same customers as 12 years ago. I'm like, you don't need to compare yourself to 12 years earlier because your customers aren't comparing you to 12 years earlier. They're comparing you to right now. So I got
Are these
fired
people with like a
for,
math background or statistical
I'm sorry?
background? Are these people, are they in finance? Like, do
No,
they have a math or statistics
no,
background? Okay.
most don't.
It seems obvious to me, but
There's very few in the executive ranks I find. Like if you don't have somebody with an engineering background in your executive, which a lot of sectors don't, you have a problem. And I'll tell you this, most finance background people can't wrap their head around this either. Like the business stats or the financial modeling mathematics, that's a completely different discipline.
yeah.
And I think that's what's throwing people off. So it becomes kind of like a political or job protecting activity that happens here. So
Okay.
it goes back to, why you're going and doing this. So that's kind of some of my big cautions.
Because we've always done it. Because vendor gets money and we can allocate it in a budget every year. Like probably not great reasons, but yeah, no, I get it. A lot of
Yeah,
this is pretty political, as you say. So
yeah,
I think that's really good, Edgar. I think that sort of like fills in some of the gaps. I'm the same. Like I think one of the questions that gets missed in this whole argument, like marketing measurement, is like, why are you measuring it? And the answer to that is actually pretty interesting, I think.
It
Yeah.
is. My big one is are you looking for an educated guess, or you just want to go and show that your guesses have been right?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of
I
going
think
on in the
it's all
background
market
for me.
research, I think.
Yeah. Like I think what's awkward is a lot of the work that I go and do comes back and shows people is that just trying to spend, trying to focus on too big of a market, too big of an issue. And
Yeah.
I'm guilty of it by myself, by the way, personally. Like
Mm.
this is not like I've known this my whole life. It's like I've come to learn this, and I've now come to systemically build a business around making that happen. But your highest value customers are the minority.
Mm.
And until you start being responsible about that, in your measurement, in why you're going and investing into brand health or marketing mix modeling or whatever, like you got to find out like who are those customers, how identifiable are they by marketing, by sales, by lead qualification, whatever the heck it is. If they're not easy to qualify, you might not be getting any benefit outside of the activity that told you that they're not easy to identify or qualify.
Yep. Yep.
So there you
Yeah.
go.
Okay, that's great. Hey, well, thanks again for your time, Edgar. I think that's really interesting, and I just encourage everyone to listen to our full interview from what was it, a year ago now, back in the day.
We're 2 years ago, I think, when we went and did it.
You're
So
one of the first ones, actually. I still remember watching the really bad recording, kind of like what I'll look like now,
yeah,
back in the old days of Zoom when they're compressing the hell out of it. So no, thanks again for that. It was really good, and I got lots
it's
of
a
good
pleasure.
comments. Yeah,
And
so
enjoy your beach in the metaverse. It's very nice.
it's like actually 10:40 p.m. on a Sunday right now, so I'm a bit tired, but no, I appreciate it, and all the best for you for the rest of your Sunday.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Take care.
Okay, I'll just stop it there. What do I press now? Oh, I can press stop up here, can't I?